Another attempt to destabilize the Sahelian country.
Il y a quelques semaines de cela, les services de renseignement ont intercepté plusieurs communications entre un individu et des chefs terroristes. Le travail minutieux des services de renseignement va révéler un grand complot en préparation contre notre pays, dont le but ultime est de semer le chaos total en vue de placer le pays sous tutelle d'une organisation internationale à mesure de reprendre le contrôle dans 10 ou 20 ans selon les instigateurs.
The security minister added that the Burkina Faso authorities are currently looking for this individual, who corresponded with terrorist organizations and who has ties to neighboring Ivory Coast.
Il faut noter que les cerveaux à l'extérieur du pays sont tous localisés en Côte d'Ivoire, y compris le nommé Bahari Abdraman. Le complot se poursuit activement depuis leur centre des opérations à Abidjan, avec pour objectif de semer le chaos au Burkina Faso avant le mois de juin.
In addition to Abdurrahman Bari, the authorities are also looking for a man named Captain René David Rudrago. The two men are reported to have worked with terrorist organizations to encourage civilians to revolt against the government. Religious and traditional leaders were key targets of this campaign. Additionally, members of the Volunteers for the Defense of the Homeland, VDP, People's Militia, were approached and offered money to demoralize their fellow combatants. The plan was meant to culminate on 16 February 2025 with a military assault on the presidency. However, soldiers and VDP members came forward to expose the plot to Burkina Faso authorities before it could be actioned. This is the sixth reported conspiracy against Burkina Faso's government. The last announcement unveiling a similar destabilization attempt was on 6 August 2024.
Welcome to this month in Africa, a collaborative effort between African Stream and Authentic African, where we break down this month's breaking news and its impact on Pan-Africanism and Africa's independence. Today, we are going to do a deep dive into the coup suspect who's been identified, as you just heard in the video. We'll talk about AFRICOM being exposed and the revolutions deepening in the Sahel region. I am Joe Hotagua, the founder and CEO of Authentic African, a platform meant to bring together Africans on the continent and in the diaspora with the end goal of having folks visit, move, and invest in the continent of Africa. And with that, I will turn it over to our co-host for their introduction.
Greetings. I'm Inem Richardson. I am a journalist with African Stream. I am also the president of the Thomas Sankara Center, a Pan-African Revolutionary Socialist Library and Political Education Center based in Burkina Faso and now Niger. And I'm a member of the All African People's Revolutionary Party, AAPRP. So I'm excited. I know this episode is going to be heavily focused on the Alliance of Sahel States, which is near and dear to me. This is, the part of the world that I call home, particularly Burkina Faso, where I've lived for the past 4 years now. I'm happy to get into it. And also, I remember that, or some of you may remember if you watched the last episode, every week we're going to be doing an ancestor call-in to start in the episode, referencing those who came before us and who will guide us as we discuss important geopolitical context in 2025. So today we're calling in Valère Sommet, who was a Burkina Faso revolutionary who was very close to Thomas Sankara and who was really one of the few people who was close in Sankara's circle and who lived his whole life and passed away without ever betraying Sankara. He wrote a very important book in French called L'Espoir Assassiné that talked about how Sankara was overthrown and what could have been done to prevent that, which is very pertinent for us as we have our conversation about what's happening in Burkina Faso with President Ibrahim Traoré today in 2025.
Absolutely. And I'll just say that, it's always helpful to kind of have the call to the ancestors to get some context on additional folks who have been a part of the movement for Pan-Africanism. I think there are many folks that the world is not aware of. So it's always helpful to hear a bit about someone who was involved in the movement. With that, I do want to do a quick overview of the video we just saw, and then I'd love to have a quick discussion before we move on to the next stories. So as you guys saw in that video, under the revolutionary Pan-African leadership of President Ibrahim Traoré, they have foiled yet another alleged coup attempt to destabilize the country and bring down his government. The nation's security minister revealed the names of the two coup plotters who he said had links to masterminds operating from Côte d'Ivoire. So the coup was planned on the 16th of April, as mentioned, but was exposed in time thanks to information provided by soldiers and home guard volunteers who the conspirators had attempted to bribe into taking part. Now, the hunt to catch these folks is ongoing. Now, I'd love to hear from you as someone who lives in the region and who has watched the rise of Ibrahim Traoré, because you were there before, of course. He came to power. What are your thoughts on the attempt here and the methods that were used, and any other context and insight you can provide around the suspects?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing I'd say is this has been ongoing. We see the first reported destabilization attempt in 2022. Now there have been between 6 or 7 officially recognized destabilization efforts. And when I say between 6 and 7, and I say officially recognized, what I mean is basically on 6 or 7 occasions, the government has come forward either arresting people or having official announcements or communications about surrounding similar plots. The number is between 6 or 7 because I realize some people consider the August 2023 and September 2023 like a single plot, and then others, it's kind of unclear if it's one single plot or if that was 2. But we see the first one happening late 2022, the month of December, then again August, and then September as potentially one single coup plot in 2023, and then 4 times last year. So January, August, September, and April. And then this is the first one reported in 2025. We've heard consistently now, particularly by mid last year, it was very clear that there are neighboring countries in the West African region that have become a hotbed of destabilization activities geared, not towards just potentially overthrowing the government in Burkina Faso, but really all 3 Alliance of Sahel state governments. And I'm talking particularly about Côte d'Ivoire or Ivory Coast, and Benin. So those are the 2 that really have attracted the most attention, that the leaders within the Alliance of Sahel states, including Ibrahim Traoré and Abdurrahman Chani, have mentioned on numerous occasions. Now, we've heard about one of the conspiracies last year involved movement between Nigeria and then a little bit in Ghana that was under Akufo-Addo, not to implicate necessarily the leadership. That's ambiguous, but just to say that, they created sort of an environment in which that sort of destabilization activity was possible. I'm less hesitant or less reserved about calling out the governments of Benin and Ivory Coast for a more active role in potentially trying to destabilize the Alliance of Sahel states, as President Ibrahim Traoré was very clear in July of last year that there is an issue with Alassane Ouattara, president of Ivory Coast, and with Patrice Talon, president of Benin, who are working with Western institutions, neo-colonial institutions, thinking of like the covert sort of intelligence agencies to destabilize the AES. One of the things that was reported last year was, in the African Stream covered this, if you recall, there was reports of talk between Ivory Coast and the United States about building a U.S. military base on the border, very close to the border of Mali and Ivory Coast, but also very, very close to the border with Burkina Faso. So anyways, I said this all to say the suspects that were accused in this recent report of last month of trying to destabilize Burkina Faso, it was clear that they were moving between Ivory Coast and Burkina Faso. it was stated in the report that they're still looking for these people. So there was, specific names given in that report. René David Ouedraogo. There was an Abdul Bari. These are people who the government are still seeking. But anyways, all this to say that those links are there. And also, it's an interesting sort of relationship where the destabilization efforts are occurring both internal to some aspects of the military or armed units, but also there is destabilization in collaboration with these terrorist paramilitary death squads that, the vast majority of people in Burkina Faso and the AES region as a whole would argue have imperialist backing. And that's also what the heads of states of these countries have said. So hopefully that answers your question and gives some context into what's going on. So, it is real. I think on social media, sometimes it's hard to tell what's true or not true about what's going on in Burkina Faso. And I really want us to be really attentive and really, really careful to be spreading correct information. And I'll talk about that maybe later also in this episode. It's very important for the future of the AES that we're very correct with our facts. But here you've heard it. I have given between 6 and 7 specific incidents where President Ibrahim Traoré, or not just him as an individual, because I know we are focused on him as an individual, and he's an important one, but Burkina Faso's revolutionary process as a whole and the Alliance of Sahel states as a whole, at least in the context of Burkina, have been targeted on those 6 to 7 occasions, plus the most recent one. So, or including.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and I think that's great context, and I appreciate that. I think, as you said, we see a lot on specifically Instagram and Twitter, right, or X, where there are a number of folks posting stories and they haven't been independently verified or corroborated with any evidence. And so I think it's always helpful to check African Stream. That's what I always do, is to check if African Stream is reported on it, because I know you are on the ground reporting, right? So, many folks who are reporting on this stuff are reporting from elsewhere. And so, having been in the Sahel region, or the AES, I should say, for the last 4 years and going back and forth between the different countries, I think you have your finger to the pulse and your ear to the ground, and know what's going on. Now, just the one piece that I wanted to add or ask for more clarity on is the bribes. You reported that there was a mention of bribes that were offered to some of the military leaders, and they came to Ibrahim Traoré to express that had happened. I know that this is how it's been done previously, but can we speak to that, like the historical context behind other leaders being overthrown because of these kinds of bribes from foreign powers, and then specifically the support that Ibrahim Traoré has that led to people not taking this money and making him aware of this plot?
Oh, I'm glad you mentioned that. There was the bribe story. So there's a popular story going around saying that one of Ibrahim Traoré's guards was offered $5 million to kill him or to shoot him. That story has not been verified, and I've talked to other local reporters in Burkina Faso about it to figure out the source of that story, and it seems to have emerged entirely on social media. So there is a real destabilization effort, and the one that has been reported last month was internal to the military, but we haven't heard of anybody coming forward. I guess what happened in terms of what has been reported is last month it was revealed that people within the Volunteers for the Defense of the Homeland and people within the Burkina Faso military came forward and said there are plotters who are working to destabilize the government. So that is reported. As for a specific guard close to Ibrahim Traoré himself coming forward and saying, I was offered money, as far as I've been able to see, it seems like that's mostly it's fake news. I have not been able to find a source that's credible that verifies it. And another sort of red flag in regards to that specific story is there are 2 images associated with it that are circulating online, and the actual person guard in the 2 images is different. one of them is Lieutenant Porgo and the other one is Lieutenant Cabore. They're not the same person. And so it doesn't seem like there's even consensus as to who was offered the money. But yeah, I'll just say that's not a verified story. I just want to say, I think it's so important. It's hard because there's a lot of reporting that's happening in French on a local level, and a lot of it is based off of government communiques, like official announcements and declarations. And then there's a proliferation and explosion of reporting and stories kind of circulating on social media that sometimes have like a grain of truth in them, but then kind of get away from the truth. The reason why I think it's dangerous, and I really, really want to urge people to check their facts, is I actually think it could potentially be because of how much it's gotten to be, like the extent of which there's reporting on Burkina Faso that's not based in reality. I actually worry that itself could maybe be part of some sort of psychological operation or campaign against the country, because I've already seen anti-Alliance of Sahel States reports saying that the basis of support for Ibrahim Traoré is built upon quote unquote fake news. So I'm already seeing the enemies basically of the Sahel revolution using it against us. But that's not to blame anybody for because honestly, it looks very legit in English, and there's very little access to that information to fact check. So it's not to blame anybody, but it's just to encourage us to be very careful.
Got it. That's important. And I appreciate that clarity. So, I think, that pretty much covers what we know today about the suspects. And then, of course, we will keep you guys all posted and updated as we know more. Obviously, as time goes on, we'll have more details and we'll be sure to share that. And so, that's why it's really important to follow what African Stream is doing, and what platforms they're on, mostly on X. And you can join some of their other groups and you can find them through X, because they're always reporting on these stories with independent journalism, background reporting, and checking on things. I think it's super important to always fact check with them when you see something out there on the internet. All right, so with that, I want to move on to the next story, which is closely related and really just speaks to the initial AFRICOM comments and the initial response and from solidarity protests and mobilizations locally and around the world. Obviously the Burkina Faso Minister of Foreign Affairs published a statement on the 15th of April denouncing remarks made by General Langleys, commander of the U.S. Africa Command, AFRICOM, about Burkina Faso's President Ibrahim Traoré. During a statement to the Senate Armed Services hearing on the 3rd of April, U.S. Senator Roger Wicker asked General Langleys about corruption and bribery connected to trade with China, to which he responded, "I don't mind calling this out. Captain Ibrahim Traoré in Burkina Faso, their gold reserves are just in exchange to protect the junta regime." So in response, Burkina Faso stated, by arguing that Burkina Faso's mining resources, as well as certain revenues from cooperation with the People's Republic of China, do not benefit the population, but rather serve to protect the regime in power, General Langleys adopts a stance that deliberately denies Burkina Faso's new sovereignist dynamic. The ministry formally denies these allegations. The concrete actions carried out on the ground testify to the sincere commitment of the Burkina Faso authorities to driving inclusive and sustainable development. Far-reaching reforms have been undertaken in the fields of agriculture, water, infrastructure, education, and health, with the aim to better distribute resources for the benefit of the population. So with that being said, General Langleys would have benefited from confining himself to his field of expertise by providing the members of the Senate committee with a more balanced reading of the causes which led Burkina Faso to reevaluate certain military cooperation agreements while respecting its sovereignty. Now, the disrespect of the United States and other Western countries toward Africa has led to some countries to sever ties with their militaries, and Ouagadougou's Neighboring ally Niger is the first African country to boot AFRICOM. Meanwhile, Eritrea never signed an AFRICOM agreement. And so with that, we can jump to this video and then we'll have some commentary on the other side.
In which the ruling elite of a country is receiving gratuities on the side that inure to the benefit of the strongman leader and not to the populace of the country. Does that sort of corruption and bribery go on with regard to the Belt and Road?
Absolutely, Chairman. I see this, and I don't mind calling them out, but Captain Traoré and Burkina Faso, as they know that both, whether it's their gold reserves, that is all those proceeds are just in exchange to protect the junta regime.
So, obviously that clip with Michael Langley has gone viral. And I think there's been obviously protests around the world and in Burkina Faso in regards to just these comments and the attempted coup. I'd love your thoughts on what was said by Michael Langley and the framing of the question by Roger Wicker from the Senate Intelligence Committee. Like, what are your thoughts on both the framing and the question, or in the answer?
Just to begin, I'm actually really glad that this happened. I'm happy that that they said this. There's no doubt in my mind that they've been thinking it for a long time. Even if he had said that Ibrahim Traoré is a wonderful president, we respect him so much, I would have a hard time believing that, right? So I think he said the truth that they've been holding on to for a long time. And I'm really glad. I'm really glad because AFRICOM is, AFRICOM exists in order to secure the United States' access to Africa's material resources and, minerals, precious resources, materials, advancing the United States' economic interests. It's a military body to reinforce the United States' economic dominance. And there's been a long campaign for, the past decade or so to say, shut down AFRICOM out of Africa. And we finally have real noise. I think that this is like a prime time now to really push AFRICOM away. So I'm actually happy about the statements because sometimes we just need our enemies to say what they think, we just need them to say it for what it is. The sugar coating and this is actually more dangerous for us. So I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised, but at the same time, I think it's kind of strategically dumb. And I think that, Langley probably feels that way right now. Like, I don't know what reaction he thought he would get. This is the best possible reaction for us. But, I don't think it was strategic on his part to say this about somebody who is at, the forefront of just global admiration for being one of the most dignified and self-sacrificing leaders. I think, Ibrahim Traoré has an impeccable reputation across this continent and across the diaspora and, increasingly just across the world in general for people who are, progressive-minded, who who want to see Africa succeed. I think the question was perhaps baiting Langley in that direction. I mean, Langley could have not said anything, but he chose to. But yeah, I think it's I don't know. I think it's a good thing. And as you mentioned in what you just read, there are two countries in Africa right now, only two, that have zero military relationship with AFRICOM, the U.S. military, Eritrea and Niger. And I really think that this is the moment. Like Burkina Faso could easily, join that right now. All three of the AES countries tend to approach things in a specific way, which is that they have tended to wait for like specific sort of moments to break certain ties. So it's like if France 24 does a very egregious interview with a terrorist, with which they do, they've talked to terrorist leaders, you know, the AES countries will use that as the moment to break that sort of tie, or to say, you know, we're not permitting that kind of reporting in our country anymore. Or you know, they'll wait, you know, Mali broke ties with, I want to say Sweden. I hope I'm getting my facts correct. After Sweden threatened to revoke aid, I think this is like the perfect time, like Burkina Faso could, you know, say, on the basis of what just happened, we're breaking all our ties with AFRICOM. I want to clarify, you know, Burkina Faso has like weak ties to AFRICOM to begin with, because of Niger severed ties, and because the three countries have a pact that says that they're going to have a shared foreign policy, a shared diplomatic policy, and a shared military policy. So it's not like any of the AES countries really have the space to work very closely with AFRICOM to begin with. I think that because Niger made that move, they're all sort of moving in a position where they're kind of forced to create distance. But I think this is really like an opportunity then to like create rupture. And so I think it's a powerful time. And I think that should be the cry. I think we should accelerate our hands off Ibrahim Traoré calls, and we should accelerate our shut down AFRICOM calls. We should shut down our, you know, US out of Africa calls. We should accelerate, you know, our AFRICOM out of Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, even though they're out of Niger, but out of the AES entirely calls. I think this is really the time to raise our voices in that direction. And so, yeah, I'm happy. I'm happy that Langley said it. I'm happy that we know who Langley is. It's about time that he becomes more of a household name. He's been up to no good for a very long time. The empire thought that its best strategy was to use somebody who looks like us against us. That's been their playbook for a little while now. Since the Obama era, they've been like, you know what, we can really succeed with this, and here it is. They're seeing that, you know, we're seeing now that it's failing. We're smarter than that. You know, we're too smart for that, and so I'm happy. I'm really happy that, you know, I think Langley is getting what he deserves in terms of popular, backlash, and he'll really, really, really get what he deserves when AFRICOM is eliminated.
Yeah, now and of course that just means removed from the continent of Africa. Just for those who are watching and are worried about that phrase, that's what she means, of course. Well, yeah, and so, you know, there's, because sometimes the phrase eliminated can be used against us. So you know, but we all know what you mean. And I will add, by the way, that it shows how tone deaf American politicians can be, right? And this is just another example of that. You know, there are people all around the world supporting Ibrahim Traoré. And, you know, if they weren't aware at the time of this hearing, they are now aware, right? And I know that the major news outlets haven't been doing much to report on all of the protests that have happened all around the world since this hearing. But, you know, it has become obvious that there's so much support. There's a groundswell of support around him, not just around the continent, which I think the West tends to ignore, but around the world. And, you know, you saw the protests in France, large numbers of people coming out across the United States, the Caribbean, and all over the world. So it's exciting to see the mobilization of people around a common cause. And also it was just a reminder of that tone deafness, which I think are really, really, really important. I think we should jump to some Q&A as you called out here. So if there's some questions here, feel free to drop them in, and we will answer whatever we can. Inem, is there anything that you're seeing here that you would like to respond to?
Yeah, I see maybe like 3 or 4 questions that I find just super important, and I would love to just quickly touch on them. The first one, I see a comment here. Do you think misinformation that is positive is done by the West, possibly because so that the AES does something good, they'll be skeptical due to previous stories? This is something that I've talked about actually with Ahmed Caballo, and something that we're a bit worried about. I mean, it's gone from persuading people to pay attention to the Alliance of Sahel states in Burkina Faso to just a tremendously positive like swell of support, which is exactly what we need. And so I want to, thank, but also it's like not really, it's to thank people for coming out in support of Ibrahim Traoré in Burkina Faso, but also to recognize that, it's not really something that you're doing for the people who live there. It's something we're doing mutually as Africans because, you know, you need Burkina Faso to succeed for your liberation as well. So it's, you know, we have this mutual interest in defending the AES. But there is a lot of misinformation, and I am worried that, and especially because we have now seen at least 3 reports saying that the pro-Ibrahim Traoré campaign is built upon lies. I am worried that this is something that's going to be used against Burkina Faso and the AES. And I am worried that it's about sowing some level of doubt. You know, I worry that it's designed to make people think that like there's too much fake news, like maybe nothing positive is happening there or something. So I just want us to be rigorous in spreading the right information because there's so much progress happening. There's so much happening that's legit that I don't even think we need. You know, I don't think we need to like share things that are false because there's just enough that's happening that's true that we can support. This is a quick one to answer. Are the videos with Traoré speaking English real? This is funny. Ibrahim Traoré himself, and I have to find the video. Maybe we can translate it and put it up on African Stream. Ibrahim Traoré himself like was laughing. He made like a side comment once about how like he's seeing videos of himself speaking English online, which is just like he found it kind of funny because like he's never spoken English publicly as far as I know, and he was like laughing about the idea that he's like speaking English online. So no, those are not real. Some of them, you know, I think sometimes people dub things that are real. Like that's a common thing. Like, you know, people subtitle things, people dub things. Just make sure it's legit. You know, is that what he said in French? And are they just dubbing it, or are they trying to like make it seem like it's the real original video? Because no, he doesn't speak English, at least not publicly. And then there was like another one towards the end. Sorry.
When I was going to say, they're called deep fakes, right? So when they take a lot of times a real video and just change the way the mouth moves and use their voice and use you know, and basically change the language or change what they say, it's a deep fake. As of right now, it's a little easier to detect them. We are about a year or 2 away from it not being so easy to detect. So that's why it's going to always be important to go to the source or go to trusted sources to ensure that it is real. When it comes to the AES, my most trusted source is African Stream. If I don't see them report it, then I don't speak about it, right? So I think that you guys should just make sure that, and you know, obviously that's why I wanted to go live with African Stream as often as possible, because you guys do the work, right? And I think it's super important for all of us to have our own trusted sources, whoever they are. And I can say, you know, myself, I believe that the African Stream is a trusted source. And so just ensure that you're fact checking. So I just wanted to throw that out there before you went to the next question.
Thank you. No, it's a really good point. There's so much good stuff. Maybe just like one more, because I know we have other stories to get into. And then I think, you know, there's some comments in here that are relevant to things that we're going to talk about anyways. But one person, Afua Warner, asked, how could the African diaspora assist in holding these people accountable? And then later she asked about a petition. You know, petitions can be great, but it's kind of hard to enforce them. But I want to say, you know, I really want to encourage people to get involved in organizations that are fighting to defend the Alliance of Sahel States, that are fighting for unified Africa, and who are fighting to shut down AFRICOM. So I've mentioned many times that I'm involved in the All African People's Revolutionary Party, AAPRP. You can join that wherever you are in the world. But if you're in the United States, there's an organization called Black Alliance for Peace that has really been at the forefront over the past decade or so of organizing an annual campaign to shut down AFRICOM, and has really done a lot of research explaining like what AFRICOM is, where it operates, and you know, the answer to that is pretty much everywhere outside of Eritrea and Niger right now. But I really encourage people to get involved. So, you know, Black Alliance for Peace would be a great place to turn to if you're really compelled to, you know, start doing things in response to Langley to defend Burkina Faso and to make sure that the United States is not in a position of power to be aggressive towards the AES countries.
Absolutely. And we'll add those to the description. So if you're watching the replay or if you're watching this live, when the replay goes live, you can go back and check out the descriptions on all the platforms, and it'll have the links to the Black Alliance for Peace and the other organization that is now escaping me that Inem just mentioned. What was the second organization? The first organization you mentioned? Sorry.
The All African People's Revolutionary Party, AAPRP.
AAPRP, yes. the AAPRP. Okay, and all right, so with that, thank you guys for your comments. We will try to get to more as we can. There are a ton of comments here, and we want to be respectful of everyone's time to try to keep this live stream from going into 2 hours, right? So we have a couple more stories that we want to cover. So we will try our best to get to any questions that we feel are relevant, or maybe we'll put some comments on the screen as we're talking. So from the failed coup plot to the response to the Michael Langley, we do want to talk about the roads project and kind of the broader projects that have been going.
I can't hear you. I think you're on mute. I'm not sure if other people can hear you, but I no longer do.
Oh, yes, I did all of a sudden end up on mute, interestingly enough. Sorry about that. So, thank you guys. Everyone mentioned that I was on mute. So just moving on to the next story, and moving on from the failed coup plot and AFRICOM, comments and the response to their comments. I want to talk a little bit about the roads project in Burkina Faso and some of the other things that have been going on to really rebuild the country and really its road to liberation. So Ghanaian YouTuber Wode Maya, who you probably are all familiar with, he's probably has the largest channel of folks who are non-music related or aren't athletes who are on the continent, who speak about the continent. He recently had a controversial interview with some folks in Orania in South Africa. And he recently has gone to Burkina Faso and, had done a ton of interviews while there. And so while he was in Burkina Faso, he talked about the ongoing and rapid transformation happening in the country. Among the most impressive changes he witnessed were the large-scale road construction and other new infrastructure projects. President Ibrahim Traoré has set a goal to build between 3,000 and 5,000 kilometers of road annually. This initiative is part of a broader strategy to enhance the country's internal connections, boost economic development, and improve the material conditions of his people. Since coming to power, Traoré has put significant emphasis on food sovereignty, industrialization, and infrastructure. So these are goals that align with the national fight for greater self-determination and true independence from the West. African Stream has covered the purchase of new road construction equipment coming into Burkina Faso, I think, if I'm not mistaken, from Ghana. So now we can look forward to seeing the results of collective work towards national determination by and for the people. So with the country's new program, young people will work to develop road infrastructure through a road brigade. Others will work towards city beautification and the creation of more green spaces. Contrary to previous initiatives in the country, this project will be supervised directly by the state rather than private countries. So let's jump to that video and then we'll have some commentary on the other side.
Burkina Faso is a revolution that I believe that the entire continent of Africa can emulate. I mean, when you have a leader that really cares about his people, he makes sure that he delivers. Guess what?
With the coming of Traoré, they are planning to pave 5,000 kilometers per year. This is insane. This is unbelievable.
How are they achieving that?
Yeah, they bought all the equipment because the government doesn't want anymore to let any company be in charge of this. So they bought all the equipment to do it by itself. The government is in charge of building all those roads that you can see.
That's crazy, man.
Yeah. As you guys, maybe some of you saw the equipment coming from Ghana.
Okay.
People made a lot of videos about it. So the equipment are here. The government is taking care of constructing or building the roads. Because, sometimes they give it to private companies and they take forever to finish some roads. So the government is now taking care of building the roads with their own equipment and everything. So that's what's happening.
And one of the most exciting thing about this whole road construction in Burkina Faso, the fact that the government bought all the equipment, trained the youth to operate this equipment. So literally, it's the people of Burkina Faso building the country for the people of this beautiful country.
The country is under construction.
Burkina Faso indeed is under construction, because I am here and I'm seeing roads being constructed. I am here and I'm seeing factories being built. I am here and I'm seeing entrepreneurs coming out saying that this is their first time, feeling so proud about their country to do business in their country. This is a revolution, and I believe that a revolution like this needs to be supported. My name is Wadamaya, an African content creator on a journey to celebrate African excellence. I'll see you all in the next one.
Well done, Wode. I think that was great that he went and did this video. I think because his platform with over 1 million subscribers on YouTube and many dozens of, hundreds of thousands across other platforms, it's helpful for him to be there and to share what he has seen. I'd love for you to talk about this particular project, but then also obviously being there on the ground and having followed this closely, there are a number of different projects that were referenced in this video, but I think it might be helpful for those watching to get a better understanding of all the things that Ibrahim Traoré had promised and that are also underway. So, this road construction project, I think, is just one of them. And then I guess one last thing that I'll just mention, actually, you know what, I'll let you get to that and maybe I'll add some stuff afterwards. But yeah, if you can, please talk about this particular project and some of the other projects that have been going on in Burkina Faso.
Okay, yeah. This is a great one. Somebody in the comments earlier asked about Wodemaya and whether or not this was a legit, video, and if we can verify it. Yes, absolutely. The road construction, at the very least, is absolutely real, and it's actually a much bigger deal than I actually think than what's being reported. Actually, this time it's the reverse, where I think that there's even more that needs to be said than what we're hearing on social media. Certainly the fact that last month the government just launched this new Fossombo Program. So the Fossombo Program is basically a program to train young people. It's okay. So this is how it works. So in Burkina Faso, there's something called the Volunteers for the Defense of the Homeland, VDPs. This is like a civilian turned combatant, like people's militia that is fighting to defend the country from these, imperialist-backed paramilitary groups that are trying to destabilize the Alliance of Sahel states. Well, now Burkina Faso has a program for these volunteers to receive military training, but also training in construction and road work and, basic city infrastructure development. So 450 people were selected. This is beginning in Ouagadougou for this new program. So they're like I said, military training comes with it. There's patriotism and what do you call it? Like civic duties and civic responsibilities training. So there's like a course on how to be like a good patriot and to really serve the people of Burkina Faso, and then training in terms of developing sort of city infrastructure and roads. So it's part of this new brigade. It's creating a lot more jobs for young people. And it's also part of the state's effort to take back some power from private companies. They basically said that private companies have had the responsibility of building these roads for a long time, but it's been sloppy, kind of like, disorganized. And, the government has said, we want to kind of take the initiative now, and we want it to happen on a state level, and we want to be able to supervise what's going on, make sure it's developing real infrastructure buy-in for the people. And so the project is just starting in Ouagadougou, the capital, but I'm very hopeful that this is something that could spread throughout the country. This is kind of like the first 450 people involved is like the test round. And I actually know somebody personally who's close to me who participated in these trainings, part of this Fossombo program. So it's really exciting. The person I know was just he's talking about how enthused he was to see it, and it's rigorous training involved. They actually don't just take anybody. You train for a while as part of the application, and then you're accepted and you get to be part of the program, and it's this whole thing, and it's an honor. It's a big honor, actually, to be able to serve your country this way. And you mentioned talking about other programs. I mean, there's so much happening that it's hard to go over like everything off the top.
Sure.
But, I'll say that, there's a lot of job creation happening in terms of industries. This year saw the creation of a wheat mill. Last year, we saw 2 tomato paste factories opening up. There's a mining waste refinery that just produced its first sort of successful gold bars that was shown a few months ago. So they inaugurated it a couple years back. It's fully functional now. They're able to produce these, refined gold bars in-house. There's the other gold refinery. There's a lot happening. I mean, there's a lot. And then agriculture, I think, is one of the most important. I mean, that's really, the state has put so much emphasis on agriculture. There's a video, I've looked for it for a very long time. I saw it months ago, and I wanted to get it translated for African Stream. It's in More. One of the criticisms we get on, actually, that I see often is that, we talk to people who speak French, everything's in French. And I think people don't understand that it has a lot to do with our capacity to translate sometimes, and not necessarily the fact that everything in Burkina Faso happens in French. You have to understand, sometimes it's like we have to, unfortunately, privilege French speaking voices because we can get that translated quickly and get it out there. But there was a video, and if I can find it, I would love to put it out there, of a farmer speaking in the More language, the local language. And he's like practically like crying tears of joy because he's like, I've never had such a successful yield in my life. Like, God bless you, President Ibrahim Traoré. I mean, the farming equipment that you've given us has basically transformed my life and my livelihood. I really need to find this video. It's a powerful one. But yeah, agriculture has been one of the sectors. And just to say, Burkina Faso is a largely, agricultural-based economy for a very long time now. So these are not just things that are happening that are impacting like a minority of city folk. The government is really, really focused on doing things that are going to uplift the majority of the country as a whole. So yeah, I mean, there's things that that maybe are not quite as sexy or as appealing as things I've seen on YouTube. There was one that was like, Burkina Faso has a new robot-operated Chinese fast food restaurant. Okay, maybe that's not quite what's happening, but I think it's actually better. The government is focusing on these bread and butter issues that are helping, the 80%, the 90% of the people who are, either rural farmers or, urban, workers, or who are working in mines. This majority of the population, those are the people that the government is helping first and foremost.
Absolutely. And there's some questions about where you can find African Stream. If you guys are watching on the Authentic African platform, the YouTube channel, it's in the description. So if you're watching the replay or you're watching live, the description has the links to all of what is available from African Stream today. So there are different versions and variations, but you can find African Stream content across a couple of different channels. And so you just look in the description below and that'll be there for you. And then I also want to just add that what I love about what is happening in Burkina Faso is he's training Burkina Faso people to do these jobs, not bringing in folks from other places where the equipment is coming from, which tends to happen all around the continent of Africa, right? One of the things that I think we have discussed previously is it seems like the folks in the Far East have been better partners than the West, but many times those folks, even though they're better partners than the West, many times those folks bring in their own people, right? So they'll bring in their people as managers, line workers, and then the hard labor goes to the Africans. And there's never really a chance for upward mobility within these organizations, and it doesn't usually tend to do much for the local entrepreneur. And so what I really like about these programs is is training people that are homegrown to be able to do these, to become high skilled workers and to be able to do these jobs that will be sustainable and help to bring the country forward. I mean, this is what they talk about when they talk about government creating jobs, right? Infrastructure, right? These things are talked about in the West, but you can see it being executed in Burkina Faso. So I did just want to mention that. So now on to the next story, and we're now going to shift gears to another section of the AES, and that is to the political situation in Mali. So President Goita, the military leader who took control following coups or revolutions in 2020 and 2021, and was sworn in as a transitional president in June of 2021. In late of April 2025, a national political forum recommended that Goita be officially named president for a new 5-year term, signaling a likely extension of his leadership. The economic progress I want to mention under Goita has been substantial. Mali has cleared its national debt, marking a major step toward financial independence. Economic growth has seen a steady, at least or around 4.3% in 2023, with projections of 4.7% in 2024, and the expectations of 5.3% in 2025, driven by strong gold and cotton production. Inflation has dropped sharply from 9.7% in 2022 to just around 2.2% in 2023, while budget deficits have improved due to stricter fiscal policies. So with that, I'd love to hear from you on this shift and how the people of Mali feel about this change and the extension of Goita's role as president for the next 5 years.
Yeah, I mean, this is very important to explain to people what happened. So there was a national process on the 28th and 29th of April, so this past month, 2025, that basically brought in members of civil society organizations, traditional leaders, as well as, elements of the Malian diaspora were also consulted to recommend and appoint Assimi Goita for a 5-year term as the president of the Republic of Mali. This is how the process happened more or less in Burkina Faso and more or less in Niger as well. So all 3 countries now have had this process, and all 3 leaders have received 5-year terms that are eligible also to be re-elected afterwards. And this is a very positive thing, because this brings stability to the Alliance of Sahel states. I'm sure, as people can imagine, those who do not want to see the Alliance of Sahel states succeed are freaking out and panicking, and fingers are being pointed, dictatorship, this and that, military rule, blah, blah, blah. But you have to understand that, for one, overwhelmingly, the people in the Sahel support the AES and want to see the 3 leaders remain in power. And for 2, because some people are like, why aren't there just elections? You can't have elections when major parts of your territory are under imperialist-backed terrorist control. I mean, there's parts of Mali that people could not even go out and vote in. I mean, that would be just kind of illegitimate, or just like what's the word? I feel like it's just kind of neglectful of their sort of ability to participate. There's right. Entire regions of Mali that are still under enemy control. But this is an incredibly positive thing for the Alliance of Sahel states in general. Assimi Goita is the current president of the AES Confederation. I think it's really important. There was a comment earlier. Let me see if I can find it and get that up. 1 second. It should be right. It's a little bit higher up. Yes. And make sure, somebody said, S.A. Smith said, and make sure we show support for the other 2 leaders in the AES. Morale is important. So there's a lot of focus on President Ibrahim Traoré. And I think it makes sense. In a lot of ways, he's the world's youngest head of state. Of the 3 leaders, I think he's probably the most outspoken. Abdurrahman Chani has given some great speeches and interviews. Assimi Goita tends to be a little bit quieter and a little bit more in the background. The Prime Minister, Abdoulaye Maïga, and the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Abdoulaye Diop, are both very outspoken in Mali, and they're like, they are very clear. They tend to, when Mali tends to speak very outwardly denouncing imperialism, it tends to come from either the PM or the Minister of Foreign Affairs. So I agree, Assimi Goita is a little bit quieter, but I think we need to understand that, this is a country that is also being attacked and targeted by imperialists right now. The only Alliance of Sahel States country to have U.S. sanctions on it is Mali. So the United States government is currently sanctioning Malian officials tied to the government in the military. Probably, who knows, maybe the United States will come to sanction Burkina Faso and Niger with time. But Mali is currently the one that is under U.S. sanctions. And so this is something that also needs to be, we need to denounce this publicly. We need to come out and say that, we can't support that. when we say we need to defend all three countries, we have to understand if something were to happen to Mali or Niger, it would also devastate Burkina Faso. Like, the three countries need each other. We cannot allow for any one of the three countries to fall. Really, we can't. It's going to throw the whole thing just, in a spiral, out in jeopardy if any one of those three countries is overthrown. So let us give our full support to President Assimi Goïta. We're excited to see him be president. We need this stability for the AES, where the leaders are able to continue this revolutionary project that they've started. Mali we don't hear as much about Mali, but African Stream has covered quite a bit about, for example, Mali's ongoing battle to have more control over its gold mines. The last update we gave was about Barrick Gold, which was it's a foreign mining company that has had its Bamako office closed. It's been in negotiations with the Malian government. I mean, I suspect that Mali probably just doesn't want them to operate in Mali at all, because Mali has not come forward to agree with any settlement with them. So perhaps this is the time when Mali will give them the boot. But we definitely know that Mali's battling 3 different foreign mining companies for control over its gold mines. Mali's at the forefront right now, building West Africa's largest solar panel field. Mali is working on building a nuclear power plant, much like Burkina Faso, and Mali is working to build also gold refineries in-house, much like Burkina Faso. So these changes are happening, and so just I just want people to be able to know and support Mali, just like they support Burkina Faso, and just like they should support Niger.
Well put. I mean, I don't even have anything to add. I think you really encapsulated it well. And so with that, I think we should then move on to the terrorist arrested in Niger, who had mostly been operating in Mali. So in a major development exposing the murky web of foreign interference in West Africa, Niger authorities recently arrested the rebel leader with alleged ties to France, Ukraine, and a terrorist organization, ISIS, after leading a violent separatist movement in northern Mali. His arrest could shed light on a shadowy alliances that have destabilized the Sahel for over a decade. While much about this person remains unknown or within the realm of speculation, here are the key points that are likely to be raised as authorities question him. So we're going to play this video, and then we'll have some, sorry, it's not a video, right? There's an image, right? So there were some key points. So do you want to speak to this a bit in terms of what we know about this gentleman or this guy, and his ties to or alleged ties to these countries mentioned on screen here, and these groups, and his arrest?
Yes, sure. So this man's name is Inkinan Ag Ataher. He is involved with a separatist movement in the north of Mali that is trying to form a breakaway state. And there's so much history to get into in terms of what that looks like. But just to give a little bit of background, it is largely a conflict that has been on and off, that emerges from France's sort of colonial history and the way France categorized and divided certain groups of people in the north of Mali. However, this is also somebody who has reported ties to ISIS, as in the Islamic State. This is also somebody who fought alongside, or I could say on behalf of, the French military, both at a time when, at one point, Mali, before Assimi Goïta, was allied with the French military. So, when Assimi Goïta came to power, those ties were cut. But he was somebody who was involved working on France's side back when Mali was a French ally, and then it continued after Mali was no longer a French ally. So it's just kind of consistently, somebody who I should say allegedly has been working with France in that capacity. And then most interesting, perhaps, is his ties to Ukraine. I mean, he was very active on social media. I think one thing I find very interesting is people who are part of his sort of organization are very active on X, formerly known as Twitter. And so he was very active on that social media site and would post praises of Ukraine. I find it kind of interesting because X, or Twitter, is very uncommon. in the Sahel, like very, very, very few people in Burkina Faso, Mali, or Niger are on that website. I don't know if people who have noticed that. There are some, but it's not popular. And there's a language barrier. So people might not notice because, there's already, because of the language barrier, people would not be able to tell. But they have like very, very like professional level sort of propaganda on their social media websites. Like, I mean, like trailers promoting their music that are like shot, they look like they're shot in like 4K, like just high level professional video editing. It's just kind of interesting. They're supposed to be in like a very remote area, pretty much in the Sahara Desert, but they have this very high quality propaganda. Anyways, I want to clarify some things, and I think it's very important to state this explicitly because it's used against the AES right now, and it's going to be used against AES more and more. And this really pains me. Like, it's one of the hardest things for me as somebody who lives here in this region. There is this like tactic, and we know this is how the imperialists do their imperializing. We know this is how they come for Africa. But this divide and conquer strategy, where they're trying really, really hard to pit specific ethnic groups against the Alliance of Sahel states. And so I just want to clear the air. Some of the leading AES people in Mali's military who are fighting tooth and nail to reintegrate Mali are Tuareg people. So, part of the same ethnic group that this man is coming from, that, he claims that they want to break away. Some of the people who are at the forefront of trying to reintegrate Mali and reintegrate and liberate the country come from this community. I also want to state very explicitly that when Mali liberated Kidal, a major success, one of the biggest military successes in West Africa, probably of the last, of the 21st century. It's a major one. Maybe I'm exaggerating. There's been other, there's been civil wars and other conflicts, but at least in the Sahel, I'll say in the 21st century, the liberation of Kidal thus far has been like the biggest military victory that the Sahel in the West Africa has seen. The people who came out to celebrate, a lot of them were like Tuaregs. Like, I mean, the videos of Tuareg people celebrating when FAMA, the Malian armed forces, came out to retake Kidal was tremendous. People were happy to be liberated and to not have to like live under the thumb of organizations that have been collaborating with groups that have been kind of using and manipulating, like sort of affiliating with this sort of religious fundamentalism. I don't believe that they buy it. I don't really believe that these groups are religious. I think that that's a tactic and like a sham. There's Al-Qaeda of Islamic Maghreb, Islamic State. There's one called Ansar Dine operating in northern Mali. I don't believe that they actually are like, I don't think religion is motivating them. But anyways, in any case, people are happy to not have to live under like their sort of control. And these separatist groups have been in collaboration with these terrorist organizations. And, they develop those links. It's just the reality of what's happened. I want to also clarify that, it's not to say that Tuareg people should not have some sort of, self-expression within, the Alliance of Sahel states, or the ability to represent their culture or to express their needs. That's not what I'm arguing. But when we talk about breaking away as a state, you have to understand they're not the only ethnic group that lives there. And they're not the only ethnic group that's lived there for thousands of years. The Fulani people have lived there for thousands of years. The Soninke people have lived there for thousands of years. There's not any place within the Sahel, really probably within West Africa and most of the continent, that's entirely ethnically homogenous. Most places in this region have had many ethnic groups in the same space. So it's very, very hard for like one group to say, this is ours, everybody else get out, it's us. I don't think that that's going to be a successful strategy for Africa's liberation in the long run. So I think we need to reevaluate that. So yeah, anyways, all this to say, his Ukraine ties, the last thing I'll touch on, his Ukraine ties are particularly fascinating. He was publicly supportive of Ukraine online, praising Zelensky. And then, he's reported to have sent rebels himself into Ukraine to receive training. And he's reported to have received Ukrainians coming into northern Mali to give trainings on the ground there. So there's an alliance between Ukraine his movement. And if you recall, we talked about this last year. If you recall, Ukrainian officials, two of them, one of them who's involved in Ukraine's defense forces, and the other one is a current actually Ukrainian ambassador. He's still a Ukrainian ambassador to Senegal, publicly pronounced their support of terrorist activity in northern Mali when Malian soldiers were slaughtered by these terrorist sort of rebel groups. So they went forward, and the one that it was tied to the Ukrainian defense forces actually said that, we gave support to them. And then the ambassador just kind of was like, glory, we're happy that they're winning and that the Malian soldiers are being killed. So people in the AES are not, they're not favorable to Ukraine's government. They're not favorable to the Ukrainian state. Of course, it's not necessarily about individual people or anything like that. But in terms of the state politics, there's a big disagreement between the AES and Ukraine. And here's another further sort of example of that.
Well put. I don't have much to add there as well. I think, for the last and final story, which I think is an important one, last but not least, definitely not least, Thomas Sankara's ideas spread at Niger's Revolutionary Training Center. And this is a story about Inem Richardson, as a matter of fact, and the work that she's been doing on the continent. So a revolutionary Pan-African political education center was inaugurated on the 15th of April in Niger to educate students as part of a broader attempt in Africa's Sahel region to fortify the revolution that kicked off a few years ago with people-backed coups that ousted Western aligned leaders. The Thomas Sankara Center for the African Liberation and Unity, run by Burkina Books, is the IG page, and is in its second location of its kind. There's one in Burkina Faso, and there's now one in Niger. After developing a similar library and political education center in Ouagadougou, the project has expanded to work with Niger's student population in Niamey. So the centers aim to increase knowledge of Pan-Africanism, socialism, anti-imperialism, and women's emancipation struggles in the Sahel to train those who are ideologically and organizationally prepared to defend, advance, and unify the alliance of Sahelian states, Africa's newest self-determining alliance. African Stream journalist Inem Richardson is also the president of Burkina Faso, is also the president, and was on site for the inauguration. So we'll jump into this video, and then we'll love to hear your commentary on the other side.
The Thomas Sankara Center for African Liberation and Unity in Niger was inaugurated in the capital city of Niamey.
Le Centre Thomas Sankara est véritablement un lieu d'étude de la science de la révolution. Nous sommes une bibliothèque socialiste et panafricaine et surtout un centre de formation politique et idéologique. Alors, comme je l'ai dit, le Centre Thomas Sankara a été créé il y a 3 ans et demi à Ouagadougou. Nous avons 4 principes fondateurs. Il s'agit du panafricanisme, de l'anti-impérialisme, de l'émancipation des femmes et du socialisme scientifique. Nous trouvons que ces principes sont les pierres angulaires de l'idéologie révolutionnaire que Thomas Sankara a avancée.
The center is located at the headquarters of the Union of Nigerian Students, a mass socialist Pan-African student trade union. The center will work with students to organize a weekly study circle based on revolutionary theory and geopolitical debate.
Ces centres, nous ne l'avons pas conçu pour une simple salle d'activité. Bien au contraire, il est un lieu de mémoire, un foyer d'idées, un espace de combat et de stratégie révolutionnaire pour l'ensemble des scolaires nigériens. Thomas Sankara, figure emblématique de la révolution burkinabé, ne représente pas seulement une époque révolue. Il incarne aujourd'hui pour nous jeunes un idéal vivant, celui d'une jeunesse africaine consciente, intègre, audacieuse et debout.
The Thomas Sankara Center in Niger will work with the Thomas Sankara Center in Burkina Faso, organizing joint activities and regular exchanges. The center has taken months of planning.
Je peux dire que c'est vraiment une opportunité énorme. Voilà, que tous les pays de l'AES puissent bénéficier d'un centre Thomas Sankara, comme le centre Thomas Sankara que nous avons au Burkina Faso ici, plus précisément à Ouagadougou.
Like in Burkina Faso, the Thomas Sankara Center in Niger will offer regular political education, programming for children and adults.
Par un système impérialiste capitaliste. Donc, du coup, on n'a pas vraiment accès à ce genre de formation idéologique politique, ce genre de formations qui vont vraiment nous libérer. On est bercé plutôt par des formations qui vont contribuer à nous abrutir plus pour que les Occidentaux puissent encore plus nous exploiter. C'est d'où l'importance de la formation idéologique et politique. Comme Kwame Nkrumah, comme Sékou Touré, comme Thomas Sankara, on a l'obligation d'apprendre vraiment.
Well done. So I will leave the floor to you to speak to the opening of this new center as the president, and what your plans are for the future. I know I think we spoke about this at some point in time last year. Was it early last year? Or maybe it was 2023. It's all escaping me now, but I interviewed you on my platform asking about your experience moving to Burkina Faso and opening up the Thomas Sankara Center. So it's great to see that you've now expanded into a new country. And as Mosey Main said, we need one of these centers in every African country. So can we talk about the decision to open up in Niger and what the plans are moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I'm really humbled and honored to be a part of a project like this. I think it's super cool. This was a major collective effort between a lot of people, largely young people, but even some from the Sankara generation involved in Burkina Faso and in Niger that worked to make this happen. And so it's great. I mean, I think, like I said, we really need to understand that all three Alliance of Sahel States countries really, really need to be supported and really need to have, basically all three countries need to be the focus of our attention. And so I think that this is going to allow, even myself as an individual to have more of a scope in terms of what's going on, not just in Burkina, but now across the AES. So I'm currently in Niger. I've been in Niger for about a month. And then I mentioned earlier, I've been living in Burkina Faso for the past 4 years. And yeah, it's just incredible. I mean, this is a very important time for the Alliance of Sahel States countries. People are building revolution. It's a process, and we appreciate all three of the leaders, Ibrahim Traoré, Assimi Goïta, Abdourahmane Chani, but it's also the people. Because we appreciate the leaders because they listen to the people. They listen to the voices of what the people have to say first and foremost. And so we really want the masses of the people, the majority of the people, to be trained ideologically to continue what leaders like Thomas Sankara started. And it's not just Sankara. We look at other Pan-African leaders like Kwame Nkrumah, Sékou Touré, Modibo Keïta, who was a great leader in Mali, Pan-Africanist revolutionary, Djibo Bakary, who's not very well known, but a great freedom fighter from Niger, for example. We look at and study all of these examples and what they had to say so we can apply it to our current situation in the Alliance of Sahel States, adapt it to the reality of the 21st century and push things forward. But we really, really need for the majority, the masses of the people in these countries to be very, very well armed in terms of their thought. They need to be sharp because, and I hate to say it, but it's just the reality. Leaders can be overthrown potentially. I'm on a wooden table, so I knock on wood, but it can happen. But if we have enough people who are very politically solid on the ground, that means that, you can't overthrow everybody. You need to have people who are well organized. You can't get rid of us all, and so that's really the importance. We don't want something where it's like you overthrow a Thomas Sankara and it's over, the whole thing's over. It's all just built upon, a single man. That's just in the long-term solution, it just can't fly like that. That's why we really need the people to have this kind of level of clarity where it's like, there's so many Sankaras or there's so many Ibrahim Traorés that, you come for one we got 1 million. I mean, Thomas Sankara said something similar. He said that, back in the 80s, that Burkina Faso is a country of 7 million Sankaras, and that if you kill Thomas Sankara, 1 million Sankaras will be born. And I think that's what we're seeing right now, in not just in Burkina, but in the AES. And so I'm really proud and I'm really happy to be a part of this. And I'm super happy with, in terms of all of our members and all the people who have worked really hard. And there's an organization out here in Niger that's just incredible called the Union of Nigerian Students, the USN. And they represent the entire student body of Niger, from like the preschool to the graduate school level. In every single region of the country, they have representatives, and they are very Pan-African, pro-Thomas Sankara. They're supportive of Muammar Gaddafi. Those are the two people that you hear about all the time in Niger, Sankara and Gaddafi. And it makes sense if you look on the map, because Niger is sandwiched between Burkina Faso and Libya. So that's why that's like the focus on both. So that's kind of, but yeah, I mean, very, very Pan-African organization that has had a tremendous impact on people's sort of political level in Niger, their consciousness, which is very sharp. And just a final note on this. So that if the Alliance of Sahel States is going to be strong, people within the countries need to be connected to one another. They need to be able to have real tangible connection across the AES, because the goal of the AES is to form a single country. So we can't lose sight of that. That's what the leaders talked about in July of last year when the AES became a confederation. They said that the AES is going to become a federation, a single federal government. Like, the United States has one federal government, or like Brazil has one federal government, or the Russian Federation, federal government. They have their little states inside, but one government. That's what the AES wants and needs. And so we need to, on the level of the people, make sure that we're preparing people to have a new national conception, a new understanding of what their national identity is. That's going to be prepared for, a new nation that's going to be born, that is going to include these internal states, but under one single umbrella. And so that's part of the work of the center. And that's why I think it's very important that we're in these different locations in both Burkina Faso and Niger doing this work. And so, yeah, it's very exciting. And I'll be going back and forth a little bit between both the countries. And maybe one day we'll have it in Mali. That would really be the goal, to have it in all three countries. So I'll stop there. I think there was a question about how can those of us, so I really want to encourage people, thank you. So I'll read the comment first. It says, well done for opening up the Thomas Sankara Center. How can those of us in the diaspora send resources to support the centers of education? So I really want to encourage people to check out our Patreon. It's patreon.com/Burkina Books. All of our day-to-day operations are entirely funded by people largely in the diaspora who want to be in solidarity with us, sending their support. So check out our Patreon. You can join us, become a monthly subscriber. Like I said, patreon.com/Burkina Books. That's the best way. We have other ways as well. You can go to tinyurl.com/Niger Library or tinyurl.com/Burkina Library. And those are GoFundMe links to our two centers. And then, you can also order books directly we have comrades who are in France. They can receive books there, and then we'll get them later. And so you can order books to their house at tinyurl.com/Sahel Sahel Books. Yes, Sahel Books. But yeah, the main one, because I shared a lot of links. The main one is patreon.com/Burkina Books. So if there's one that you're going to check out that one.
Absolutely. And yeah, and I want to say, obviously, training the next generation of leaders is super important. And I'm so happy to hear that you are involved in that kind of a movement, because we need people to not just talk about it, but be about it, right? You're literally, acting on practicing what you preach. With that, you mentioned, obviously that there are books that people can read, and some people are talking about books here. I know that we'd like to close this out with a book recommendation. You always have great books that you recommend. Do we have some book recommendations or a book recommendation for today's live stream?
Sure. Yes. So I mentioned earlier during the Ancestor call-in that today was dedicated to Valère Sommet, who did write a book. The book is called L'espoir assassiné. So as you can tell, it's in French. I don't believe that there's been an English translation yet. I've never seen one. But if you do speak French, check out L'espoir assassiné. Now, if you speak English, I have to encourage people to read Thomas Sankara Speaks. Some people have read it, some people haven't. I'm sure everybody's heard of Thomas Sankara. This is the moment to learn directly from the man himself what he had to say. It's one thing to go and, hear, I could tell you what Thomas Sankara had to say, and, that will be filtered through my opinion and my analysis, and, I like to believe it's a trustworthy one, but that's very different from going to Sankara himself and forming your own opinion. So if you have not read Thomas Sankara's speeches yet, this is the time. Check out Thomas Sankara's speeches. Thomas Sankara Speaks. It is the most complete English language anthology of his works. And this is what is going to guide the future of the Alliance of Sahel states in terms of the direction people are turning towards and the way people are going to be thinking and, the campaigns that might happen. So, yeah, that's my number one recommendation today.
Awesome. And for those of you who are watching, make sure that you also follow all the platforms in the description. And ones that you might not see there are Burkina Books on Instagram as well. You mentioned patreon.com/Burkina Books that somebody put here in the chat. And subscribe to all platforms across. So those of you who are watching on Twitter or X, formerly known as Twitter, follow Authentic African. Those who are watching on YouTube, follow the links in the description. There are a few nuanced links that you can follow to get the African Stream content that you're seeing here today and that you've seen throughout this live stream. If you notice, we are playing videos and posting content from African Stream. So you can find it today. You just have some specific ways that you have to find it. So those links are going to be in the description below. So with that, I want to thank you guys all for joining for so long. Quite a engaged crowd today and a large crowd that joined today. So I want to thank you guys all for watching. And Inem, thank you for all the work that you do. We will see you back again in a few weeks for the end of this month's version of This Month in Africa. Any final words from you, Inem, before we go?
Protect and defend the Alliance of Sahel states. Keep coming out for President Ibrahim Traoré, but don't forget Assimi Goïta and Abdurrahman Chani also in your solidarity. Check the facts. Make sure that your facts are solid. Nothing that the enemy can use against us. Those are my parting words. And get involved. Join an organization, like I said, if you're not in one, and within whatever organization you're part of, keep raising your voice for the Alliance of Sahel states. This is our liberated zone.
There it is. All right. Thanks, guys, for watching. See you guys all in a few weeks.